This honestly might be the scariest documentary I've seen for a really long time, and it's not going to be what you think it is. I watch a lot of disturbing content online. I watch a lot of horror movies, as you know, but some of the stuff coming out of these awful guys' mouths was some of the most insufferable, narrow-minded, ignorant, and just plain hurtful words I've ever heard.
Hi everyone, a very warm welcome or welcome back to this corner of the internet. If you don't know me, my name is Catherine, and if you do know me, again, I'm so grateful that you could make it here or make it back.
Am I the only one that feels like we are kind of at war with men right now? Or like, I'm feeling very against men right now. Like, I go spaces where there's majority men, and I feel there's something there. I feel like I am resentful, like when I go to the gym and there's guys there, when I go golfing and it's all men, I'm just like, I think all of you hate me. I think all of you hate me and wish that I...
So I actually wanted to begin this discussion by appropriately grounding us, because I've realized that, you know, it's good to have some anchoring in the beginning, especially when I know that by the time we get to the end, we will be all over the place. I will have lost at least like half of you. So yeah, I want to familiarize you to my thoughts and my headspace as I watch this documentary.
I don't know if it's 2026. Whenever I get on my phone or turn on the TV, it's always like new headline, and it's the most important one, and it's the worst one, and it's the one you need to learn everything about because you gotta stay informed, no matter at what cost, even if it's your mental health, right? No, right? That can't be. I feel like there's something so unnatural about knowing every horrible thing everywhere, all before breakfast. We're not designed for omniscience. But like, that's what's wild. I feel morally obligated to ingest it all. Like, if I don't consume every headline, I'm irresponsible. And if I don't have a take, then I'm uninformed. And if I log off, oh, I'm complicit. I'm a part of the problem. Kat, don't talk about this stuff. Are you crazy? Yeah. You can't be shocked. Of course, a little sprinkle in there. When God was whipping me up, he just, oh God, she'll be fine, send her in. I just don't think our nervous systems as human beings were meant to process this much news. Constant exposure is not the same thing as meaningful action. I genuinely don't think my body knows the difference between a tiger outside a cave or a national headline. Information without agency turns into helplessness. And then helplessness, that turns into anger. And then anger turns into division. And here we are.
I personally think that it is urgent that you are made aware of where my potential biases could stem from. And so I'm telling you right now that I watched this documentary whilst I was simultaneously rereading 1984. At the same time, my TikTok feed, like I'm sure, you know, all of your TikTok feeds, was just so saturated with people expressing their exhaustion, their disillusionment, their lack of confidence with the world at large, with society, with the future. And if I'm being honest, I was in a disillusioned state myself. So all of these things in effect converged all at once, you know, Orwell's dystopia, systemic despair, economic despair, just tiredness with everybody and the world, politicians, like everything.
I am so tired. I have been working and stressing and running at full speed ever since I was a kid. And I've been working so hard and putting in so much effort, and the results don't mean anything. And I feel like I'm always constantly just messing up or trying and failing. And I'm just so tired. And I have to keep going. I have to keep thinking about life plans and how I'm going to make the most of it and how to make as much money as possible so that I can finally rest. I just want to rest.
I don't want anything anymore. I don't want a house. I don't want kids, any more kids. I don't want a relationship. I'm not looking for a partner or a marriage. I'm not looking for a dream job. I'm not looking for a dream career. I don't want to go back to school. I don't really want to learn any more hobbies. I don't want to do anything. I feel broken. Like, I feel like I've lost all motivation to live and to try to achieve things because I really don't feel like it matters. And I feel like all of this is a filthy scheme and trick. And I'm not suicidal. Like, I'm not trying to kill myself, but I really do not see the point of living anymore. Am I alone? Am I just crazy?
Social alienation, and of course the pervasive sense that for some the world has become essentially structurally inhospitable to genuine human flourishing. Again, I did not enter this documentary entirely immune to that sentiment myself. Now, within manosphere discourse, there obviously exist numerous beliefs that provoke intense alarm amongst critics. Many of these beliefs are interpreted as, you know, as indeed troubling, and in a lot of valid cases corrosive. But if I'm being completely honest with you, if I'm trying to be, as I am obviously trying to be really transparent, I have personally never been sufficiently triggered or or even really fazed by a specific manosphere personality. I have, unfortunately or otherwise, never shared the degree of alarm that accompanies discussion of these communities, or even what is actually discussed within these communities. It's never struck the emotional nerve that I guess typically it does.
These men are middle-aged and they feel like they can't argue with women their own age. They don't ever bring academics onto their podcast. They always bring on barely out of their teens or actually in their teens OnlyFans models, right?
Yeah.
And they have felt left behind by women their own age. And now they're terrified other men are also going to leave them behind. So what they're really doing is trying to keep all these other men and boys down with them in the trenches. And it's like, no, let them go, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's your problem if you've got, don't gaslight everyone into thinking you're normal. You don't look happy.
And that is not because these ideas are benign. That is not because I'm trying to be deliberately dismissive of the alarmism that that comes with these discussions. It's not because of that. It's simply because I like to look at strategies of persuasion logically, objectively, and I just find being overly emotive and triggered about certain discussions is really unhelpful. You guys, I truly do believe, and this is a hill that I will absolutely die on, that extreme beliefs are more often than not derivatives of one, like a singular, more urgent belief. And it's usually the kind that circulates around how a person understands their existence. And in this case, how men understand their existence, their significance in the world. And if your objective is effective persuasion, if your goal here is to dismantle extreme beliefs, which again, being completely transparent, is actually not the goal of this video. This is not a video like debunking the manosphere. I'm just not interested in doing that. But yes, my point is, if your goal is to dismantle extreme beliefs, you first need to begin by at least coming to honestly some humility in understanding that what is being discussed is often not the actual problem. It's usually a smokescreen.
The main problem with Inside the Manosphere, this Louis Theroux documentary, is that it doesn't really delve into the reasons as to why a lot of young men feel so drawn to this manosphere type content. It does a really good job of exposing these guys, showing their relationships, and also really tackling, why these men may have these super misogynistic, toxic views or what have you. It did a pretty good job of that. But when it comes to the people at the bottom, the fan base, the guys who comment, the guys who follow these guys, the guys who go to the seminar, why do they feel this way? Why do they feel the need to get this dating advice? Why they feel like they have to be millionaires with Lambos in Miami Beach? Why do they feel that way? And Louis Theroux just kind of bypassed all of that. So if you're not really willing to delve into the problem, then how are you going to figure out a potential solution?
And it is imperative that you at least give yourself to study the underlying fracture. So before addressing the manosphere directly, I think it is worth acknowledging a subtle, like a cultural intuition that actually transcends all of these confused gendered subcultures. What I'm noticing, and please guys comment down below and let me know if you're seeing the same thing, but what I'm seeing and what I've been becoming increasingly sensitive to is the fact that across demographic subcultures, I'm talking men, women, religious, secular, it doesn't matter. There seems to be a growing suspicion that contemporary social structures are calibrated in ways deliberately antagonistic to human flourishing. Some call it corruption, okay? Some call it systemic failure. Some call it some call it the algorithm, and others, as we know, call it the matrix. The manosphere, as we appreciate, has adopted this term quite enthusiastically, and where I begin to diverge slightly from their interpretation is the simple fact that I don't believe that the system is only calibrated against men, with a caveat that I do believe it is uniquely calibrated against male efforts to assume their significance in the world. So to reiterate, not only calibrated, but uniquely calibrated. I do think that there's a specific kind of conspiracy going on here. And I say this not because I so severely sympathize with their complaints, but because, you guys, I've seen it happen in real time and I don't envy it. Truly, as a woman, I do not envy the things that men have to go through. And what's interesting about this is that when I've spoken openly to the closest, the most trusted of my male companions, acquaintances, friends, whoever, about the problems that the difficult dynamics that I've experienced as a woman and that women at large experience, not with exaggerated emotion, but just by mirroring the same experiential honesty that they have, expressed my way, that, because it's a dialogue, right? It's a conversation. I noticed that when objectively minded men are conscientized to our experiences, they don't envy what we have to deal with either. And I find it so fascinating that everyone is contemptive of the opposite side, and yet no one wants to trade. But obviously immaturity, and especially so online, turns this, inevitably into a competition about who is suffering more. That is actually one of the points where I found myself quite irritated watching the documentary by Louis Theroux. I feel like I'm saying it wrong, and I really do apologize. I don't mean to butcher the name, but yes, I truly do apologize if I'm saying it incorrectly. But yes, my sentiment is that I found myself I found myself annoyed with him when it came to one of the first questions he asked. At one point in the documentary, he asks, "Is the Matrix real?" But when people invoke the idea of a Matrix, they are rarely speaking about science fiction overtly. Well, okay, I might be speaking about science fiction because I love science fiction, but okay, like when we talk about a matrix as it pertains to the manosphere, politics, society, they're rarely referring to something fictional, something unrealistically conspiratorial. They are describing a system in which individual agency appears persistently sabotaged unless one capitulates to its operational logic. In other words, a structure that rewards obedience and punishes independence. And you can see this tension everywhere. Consider the questions that people quietly ask themselves. Can a person ascend to the highest echelons of politics without in some way, in some measure, participating in some collusion? Can corporate success be obtained without nepotism, without corruption, or without that inevitable burnout that ends up frying out half the company? Can genuine financial prosperity be achieved without manipulation, without some form of speculative predation or deception, or especially when it comes to stock market trading? And if the answer to any of these questions I've presented feels ambiguous, if even a modest degree of ethical compromise seems structurally incentivized, then I would argue that the conceptual architecture of a matrix seems very much plausible, very much possible, and very much alive in this day and age. And interestingly, the psychological consequences of such a system do bear, in my personal opinion, remarkable resemblance to the dystopian conditions articulated in George Orwell's 1984. In 1984, the party, right, the governing state, does not merely regulate behavior. It systematically dismantles the psychological preconditions necessary for resistance. And it does this through, I think I can identify at least 4 interlocking mechanisms. The first being isolation. Individuals are in effect severed from true, meaningful human relationships. And then we have epistemic destabilization. Truth itself becomes malleable and constantly rewritten through things like propaganda, through things like the ideal the ideal script to interpret your life and everybody else's lives. Then we have chronic atmospheric fear. Threat is no longer episodic, but ambient. It's this horrible, omniscient psychological climate that everybody has to endure. Then we have emotional deprivation. What we see happening is that love, trust, and loyalty become politically subversive conditions. Under such conditions, we find that even resilient individuals, even people who, have grown up knowing how to fight, they gradually lose their cognitive capacity to imagine alternative futures. And this is critical to understand because hope is eroded through prolonged psychological destabilization. This is precisely how, in the book, Winston is defeated, because the party does not win against him by killing Julia or by killing everybody he loves. They win by forcing him to betray all he has known before, all he loves, and that includes Julia. That distinction is critical because we have to recognize that in this day and age, there is tenuous relational stability between the sexes. Betrayal annihilates something so much deeper than just bodily safety. That's why they couldn't just, get rid of someone. Betrayal is so much more caustic, is so much more affecting because it annihilates trust itself. And trust is the relational substrate against which resistance depends. I want to address another urgency as a woman, but also because in this discussion, when it, as it pertains to the manosphere and yeah, everything patriarchy coded. Yeah, the can of worms in effect that this discussion is. It's important that I feel to discuss this, and that is having babies.
I have a controversial take. I do not believe that women actually enjoy being childless. I think deep down inside, most women want a family. I think they want a child. I think they just cannot find a partner, or they do not have the financial resources to go about it. And so they bash mothers, especially the ones who didn't care if they had the resources or not, because that is what they really want. It's actually a form of projection. I just watched this video of a girl doing an unboxing, and she was like, imagine coming home to a child instead of this. And as a person who has the gift of reading in between the lines, I'm telling y'all, that girl wants a child. She wants a baby. She just does not have her life set up to have a baby. Stop letting the internet manipulate y'all into believing something that's not true. If you are a woman that is really childless by choice, then you will not have to announce the fact that you are childless by choice. You will not have to bash mom. If you don't take anything away from this video, I want you to take this. A lion does not have to roar for you to know that a lion is in the room. You'll just see it.
I want to talk about transparently the growing disinclination to have children, not because I necessarily, I necessarily share the sentiment. Anyone who knows me will know that is not my stance at all. But again, I do believe that when it comes to these discussions, it's important to at the very least engage with the root, right? Engage with the source of the fracture. And when I study this through from an evolutionary perspective, from a fully biological lens, anyone really will be able to appreciate that the refusal to reproduce actually constitutes as an extreme adaptive signal. Reproduction is among one of the most powerful drivers encoded within all living organisms. When significant proportions of the population begin demonstrating this extreme reluctance to reproduce, it reasonably suggests that the environmental conditions are being interpreted by this particular population group as hostile to long-term survival. Historically, such signals arise under such conditions of warfare, famine or ecological collapse, starvation, systemic political breakdown. We know all these things. Yet a curious phenomenon has emerged in modern societies. It is mostly women who are expressing aversion towards motherhood. This is noteworthy to me because many manosphere narratives very, very confidently assert that what women want most urgently is to have marriage, to have a husband, or to have a committed sexual partner and families. Yet we're definitely seeing something completely different. People, even men actually are expressing that disinclination to have children. Although I believe, it's just my opinion, but I believe they are absorbing a lot of the anxiety and reasonable aversion from women, because we are the ones who have to birth the children. I think we as women have a lot of agency in directing the trajectory of the conversation and the outcome of our ambivalence. And so, speaking completely personally, the conditions under which I as a woman would feel biologically disinclined to reproduce are not complicated at all. Two variables in particular determine the outcome of that equation. We're looking at, first, relational safety with the father of my child, and second, environmental confidence in the world that my child will end up inhabiting. It's really, it's very simple, guys. It's not complicated, but okay. There are a few things in my notes I want to say, but I think I'll pause it here. I want to move on to another sentiment that I feel is really important to bring to discussion within typical manosphere discourse, because to reiterate what I said earlier, I do believe that there are complexions, there are flavors, there are many dimensions of contempt and offense, and also, I think just woundedness that undergirds this discussion. But yes, a recurring sentiment occurs with, I think, notable consistency. The claim, in effect, that women are quote-unquote no longer the same, that, these ideological movements like feminism have eroded authentic conceptions of masculinity. And if I'm being honest, to some extent, I do agree. There is definitely, in my opinion, a disturbingly accurate kernel of truth embedded in that complaint, but I do believe that the interpretation that follows is profoundly mistaken. The fundamental societal function of masculinity has, in my opinion, never been truly about sexual domination or conquest. When I study this out across the anthropological record, I believe that masculinity's civilizational purpose has been the restoration and preservation of security within the polis, within the kingdom or the civilization or the village, whatever it happens to be. Point is, you are our guardians, you are our warriors. Because men possess certain biological advantages in, for example, physical strength, they have traditionally constituted as the final defensive perimeter, particularly against instability, against violence, against chaos, and yes, against the wiles of other violent, like tyrannical men. And so masculinity, at its highest expression at least, manifests not as domination, but as protective responsibility. The willingness to stand between vulnerability and destruction. However, like I said, I think that manosphere ethos frequently substitutes this protective ethos into a completely unhelpful aspiration. Through a manosphere coded sort of paradigm, men are effectively encouraged to invest in the expansion of their personal empires. I'm talking wealth accumulation and obviously hedonistic autonomy. But I do think that men who consistently orient themselves towards the defense of their own appetites as opposed to the defense of their own communities, they are not restoring stability. They are actually reproducing instability. And in this respect, the hedonistic caricature of an empire builder is scarcely indistinguishable from the tyrant who would burn a nation to the ground in pursuit of his own legacy, of his own of extending his name, extending his permanence through conquest, through sexual domination, through, let's be honest, through having lots of children. But my point is that both figures erode the social conditions that actually build up communal safety. Both figures compromise what is ultimately necessary to sustain coherence. And so ultimately both are dangerous. And neither recognizes the subtle transformation occurring in their own psychology. And that is the gradual emergence of predation. I spoke about in another video, the predatory female archetype. I'm going to link that up below. But there was another video that I did a long time ago. I'll link it up below. I'll link it up in the cards so that you can reference that, because I'm pulling on a lot of the principles that I spoke about there. But first and foremost, I need you to understand that when I speak about the word predation, when I speak about typical predatory psychology, we're not talking about something that emerges from overt cruelty, from obvious evil, malevolent intentions. No. More often than not, it emerges as a quiet but a very effective redefinition of value. Specifically, what kinds of human beings are considered as legitimate objects of consumption. You guys, seriously, there is one statement within that documentary that captures this philosophical fracture with such an unsettling clarity that I had to. It would be remiss of me not to discuss it now. But yes, a follower declares, as a man, you are born without value, and so therefore you must create value. As a woman, no. As myself, as me, I'm gonna speak fully for myself, because I know that some of my sentiments are not widely shared. But speaking fully for myself, guys, of all of the propositions that are circulated throughout manosphere culture, that might be the most existentially disturbing to me. Like, I will make you a sandwich. I will do whatever. But I'll explain to you why I feel so strongly about this. But when we strip this down to its ideological core, this is probably the most dangerous belief, because it is from it that all other beliefs derive. It is the founding principle, in effect. It exposes an underlying metaphysical belief about human worth itself. And from the female perspective, it's hardly surprising and quite saddening, honestly, that so many men have internalized this belief. But I don't think they realize that this is what is damning them, because its implications are deeply troubling. If a man truly believes that he is born without value, then his entire life becomes this endless existential campaign to manufacture worth through external achievements. I'm talking your money, I'm talking status, I'm talking reputation, I'm talking power, I'm talking sexual conquest. And within this framework, men often perceive women as possessing this unfair intrinsic advantage because we are born, apparently, according to their sentiments, we are born with beauty. More crudely, I hear, you're born with tits and a vagina. Why are you complaining? The bones of what they're saying is that we are born with inherently tradable with inherently tradable materials without having to work for them. Beauty, desirability, social favor. Again, it's like all women are born with these inherently tradable qualities, and we didn't have to work for them. And that, again, also the sentiment that all women want to trade those qualities in the dimension that men expect. Obviously, that's through some kind of sexual exchange. Firstly, I think a lot of us forget that female beauty and reproductive capacity, these are diminishing qualities over time. And for most women, well, I won't speak for most women, but I can definitely speak for a lot of women, being valued only for sexual accessibility and for for capacity to bear children, even if we do want to bear children, is no less dehumanizing than a man only being valued for his utility, for his economic productivity. A man reduced to the extraction of his labor is, in effect, dehumanized because he's a slave. If she only wants you for what you can materially produce, that's not a compliment. And I'm beginning to realize, just watching that documentary, that a lot of them think that it is a compliment, which is scary, because do you realize that there is nothing in your humanity worth preserving and investing in if a woman decides to stay with you exclusively by virtue of your financial status? I don't know if it's clicking, like, you're not human to her. You're disposable. It's really not where, like, I'm being so serious, it's really not where you want to be. And I think a woman reduced to the extraction of her sexuality is equally commodified, because you see, both are equally corrosive binaries. Both are forms of commodification, and both transform human beings into instruments of consumption. Now, there is a further irony, I think, embedded within. Again, we're discussing typical manosphere discourse. And it came up in the documentary. I did feel it, again, necessary to address it. But again, I do feel that it is rarely acknowledged. And it recurses on the fact that many of those who idolize the sentiments of this movement believe that women possess inherent value simply because most men will desire them sexually, right? And yet, those same men insist that they would disown their daughters if those women were to exploit their sexual desirability for material gain. But in the same breath, they were born with this advantage. They were born with this intrinsic value. Why not logically put it to economic use? The contradiction, you guys, is striking. Because if beauty truly constitutes as a woman's primary form of value, then logically maximizing that value should be applauded rather than condemned. I think that the visceral revulsion that most men also reasonably express when presented with the idea of their daughters engaging in sexual exchange for some kind of material gain, I think it really does expose a deeper cognition that is motivating the quote unquote masculine conviction here. They know, perhaps subconsciously, that such transactions are degrading. They have participated in the system, okay? They more than understand its humiliations. And it is perhaps precisely because they understand those humiliations that they would necessarily recoil at seeing their own daughter subjected to them. And so, on that point, I want to ask, I'm genuinely curious. If you know, because I know that when it comes to what I don't want my sons to go through, when it comes to the behavioral conditions, especially as it concerns their interactions with women and how they conceptualize their value and themselves in relation to women. When I think about the things that I would not want my sons subjected to, when I think about the things that I that I would raise hell seeing my brothers subjected to. There simply exists no world where I would give myself permission to exact those behaviors on other men who are not related to me, who are not, who I don't know, who are not my flesh and blood, if that makes sense. So again, I don't know, I question the psychology. If you wouldn't want your daughter subjected to it, why would you subject other women to it by your own hand? It's really confusing to me. Maybe it's a matter of principle, I don't know, but moving on. Another curious feature of this discussion is the mutual refusal, I think, from both ends to acknowledge vulnerability. It's almost like, especially when I engage in these discussions, it's almost like both ends of the aisle approach the discourse with their swords metaphorically drawn. Like the admission of emotional truth constitutes as some, I don't know, like some emotional disadvantage. Yet beneath the ideological conflict lies a fundamental understanding, a fundamental frustration that, guys, the world is volatile, it is chaotic, it is unstable, and instability affects men and women uniquely, but not exclusively, not exclusive. This is not like the sufferings of this life are not exclusive to only men or only women. They affect us differently, but they harm us both. The documentary opens up with a revealing assertion, and what's the quote? The quote actually says, yes, a man who is not dangerous will never be seen as successful. The implication, in effect, is that intimidation functions as evidence of agency, right? And a man capable of evoking fear possesses the power to bend the surrounding world to his will. And so embedded in that conviction, embedded in that assumption, is that reality itself resists male effort. The earth pushes back, society pushes back, women push back, and perhaps the most psychologically destabilizing wound emerges when that resistance produces productive futility. A man's labor may fail to generate the necessary resources that are critical to sustain life, and in such moments he confronts a terrifying possibility that he himself, not just his efforts, but he himself as a human person may be inherently disposable, and that is tragic. That is truly, I have a lot of feelings about this, but I want to expand on this in the conclusion. Yet this masculine anxiety does indeed have a female counterpart, a sort of parallel that ends up playing out. Whilst men often fear uselessness, women often frequently express anxiety upon being abandoned. The feminine wound recurses against relational deprivation, the terror of being withheld from by man, by society, and yes, by God. I discussed this mechanism, I think, in a video I did a couple of months ago where we discussed the edenic fracture in Genesis. I encourage you to go and check out that section. I will link it up in the cards or down below. But basically, relational abandonment disfigures the psyche with precisely the same violence that productive futility inflicts upon the male identity. And you see its traces everywhere. People often ask with mild bewilderment, okay, why did she go absolutely crazy when I slept with her and we agreed, like, no strings attached and everything, but you know, we did the deed, everything happened, and now she's become a completely different person. Like, Catherine, she's changed. I don't get it. I don't understand why. It's not a trick question. It's the same reason why a father's relational abandonment or even emotional abandonment from his daughter can shape her psychology for decades. And again, with the same incredulousness, they wonder why would a man cheat, if not understanding that if a man feels chronically disrespected in his own home, that is for him, that could be a psychological trajectory towards infidelity. It's not excusing the cheating. It is not, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not excusing cheating. I just feel like people are so unaware of what contexts inform people's sudden behavioral changes. Girls becoming like just not acting themselves, or men making really out of character decisions. There are contexts, right? There are wounds that inform these behavioral changes. It is not it is not a mysterious question, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Two different fractures are in effect being activated. One wound concerns utility and the other concerns abandonment, but both inevitably are forms, I think, of existential betrayal. To his credit, I think that George Orwell understands this principle really, really well. Again, to reiterate what I said earlier, they don't kill Winston. The party does not destabilize his will by threatening to execute him. No, that's not how human psychology works. The regime orchestrates something far more psychologically devastating. They force Winston to abandon Julia because they understand something about human psychology that most commentators tend to overlook. Betrayal, abandonment is far more psychologically disfiguring, especially for women, than violence. And well, it can be. Not always, but it's very it's really effective. I often wonder if the plot turned out differently, if, you know, the regime collapses and they descend perhaps into war and Winston ends up the hero of everything. I believe that if Julie had full wind of Winston's abandonment, of Winston's betrayal, like full conception of how alone she was, especially in a context where she trusted him so deeply, I think Julia would become Winston's next enemy, genuinely. And I think to some extent that has sort of happened in modernity. I think that a lot of women know that if they can persuade men that they're not merely flawed, but also intellectually and materially inferior, and worse yet, disposable, half the battle in effectively through vengeance, through this contemptive exercise of recompense in punishing the male population for not being there when they should have been, will already have been won. Because if you can convince a population that they are inherently expendable, they will begin policing themselves on seriously on their own behalf rather. It's really a powerful psychological tool. Again, it's the critical thing to understand is that if they believe from jump, right, they are inherently expendable, they inherently have no value, they will spend their times working to prove otherwise. They will become slaves to some system. Again, they will begin policing themselves on your behalf.
Men don't really see what purpose they have, right? Misogyny and patriarchy has given them this idea that you have these specific purposes, and none of those purposes are about enjoying their lives or having quality time with the people they love or their family or their kids. It's all about provide, protect, you know, and so they're given these sort of jobs in life. And then that's been stripped away because women have independence now. Women are able to go out and get Uber Eats. You know, we don't need to forage anymore, just get Deliveroo. We've got walls and windows, so we're a bit safer than we used to be. There's no lions in London, so we're safe from that. And so we are becoming more independent. We can provide for ourselves. Women are outperforming men academically. They're buying more houses than men. They're securing themselves financially. And so men are losing a sense of purpose beyond their seed. And now even that, women can just go and have IVF. A bunch of my friends are just having babies on their own via come in a lab. Yeah, exactly. And so men are losing hold, they're losing grip.
Women frequently describe fears as unreliable partners, abandonment, unsafe relational environments, emotional betrayal. But men, by contrast, describe fears such as economic unusefulness. Not that they don't have the same, fears that women do. Not that they're not hurt or made unstable by the same pains that women fear, that women go through. But I find that the urgency it's different. I guess it manifests different. It manifests differently. That fear of disposability within the economic hierarchy. I think this is just my opinion and by what I have personally seen, but I think it affects men much more severely than it does women. Again, different anxieties, but recursed against the same underlying threat. Both fear structures ultimately jeopardize the primary biological objective, the preservation and the continuity of human life, which brings us rather inconveniently or it actually conveniently, depending on how you look at it, to our earlier metaphor. If a social system simultaneously produces male fears of economic futility and female fears of relational instability, one begins to suspect that the system itself may be structurally hostile to the cooperative conditions, right? The joint efforts between men and women necessary for human life, not just to survive, but to flourish. In other words, one begins to suspect something quietly resembling a matrix. Guys, I have addressed quite a few, okay, not many doctrines basically circulating within the manosphere, and I don't think I could address them all. But the belief that concerns me the most is not the loudest, is not the most, it's not the most sensational, but it is, I believe, the most consequential, and it is the belief that you are inherently born without value. I think, I wonder who came up with that, really, because it is. I mean, if I were the villainous overlord, like with an objective to destroy humanity, that would be the one that I would make sure sits within a young person's internal programming. That would be like, it's so brilliant. I mean, it's horrible for us, but like, gosh, it's so interesting that it's uniquely transplanted within the male psyche, a human entity calibrated on what I personally believe to be a form of slavery programming. Will never know that they were never meant to exist merely in this world as instruments of utility. And I'm hoping, because I'm a computer scientist, I'm a programmer, I would love to show you guys how the human mind is so much analogous to a computer system, the way it's programmed through trauma, through different fascinating mechanisms. Essentially, there are scripts that you can put into a computer, and they work the same way when transplanted into the human mind. It's really fascinating, but we'll save that for another video. A person on this programming will never be able to conceptualize that they're not just workers. They're not just warriors or servants. They will never be able to internalize that they are sons. To see oneself, right, primarily as a laboring creature whose value, whose worth within the hierarchy depends solely on their output, depends solely on your reputation. It's very different from the understanding of oneself grafted into the family. It's especially, I'm speaking about this by Christian theological standards, but it is really interesting. I mean, guys, I can't tell you the number of times where I've been in situations where I've had to communicate that I'm more than grateful just for your presence, for being exposed to your presence. It's so hard for people, specifically within this space, to conceptualize that the fact that they are alive is something that someone can be genuinely grateful for, genuinely thankful for. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't click. And I think maybe I think that's a function of the way most boys grow up. They're not told, hey, you are beautiful, you are valuable, all of these things. But to be honest with you, I can't say that I was necessarily inundated with that myself as a female growing up. So, Anyways, the documentary, one speaker articulates that men are not supposed to be happy, that it's all about suffering.
Believe it or not, guys, I actually have more to say, because, guys, this has really struck a chord with me. I just feel like this endless conversion of suffering into some kind of productivity campaign always ends up transforming honest pain into fuel for the ideology. Every injury that these men have to endure becomes yet another justification for continued participation in the system that produced it. I was rewatching some parts of the documentary, and there was one of the guys who recounts losing his brother to suicide, and his response isn't grief. It's a declaration that one must simply move forward. it's such a tragedy because there's no desire for it's framed as a desire for strength, but there is such an absence of permission to mourn. Even the suffering or collapse of others within the hierarchy, within the ideology, becomes instrumentalized. And so that's where I do feel that it gains the contours of a cult. Seriously, like I didn't want to go as far in using such extreme language, but genuinely, that is what I feel is happening. When I just feel that when individuals reach the limits of their perceived agency, survival itself clearly becomes the only objective. And that brings us probably to the most urgent implication of this entire autopsy. When men fail to achieve respectable success within the system, their failure is rarely interpreted as evidence that the system requires reform. Instead, when they fail, when they die, their failure becomes an example to others within the system, used to motivate others to work harder. The lesson becomes, oh, don't become them. What is rarely considered is whether or not the solution might involve something very different. Where are our structures for men that confer dignity rather than constantly demanding endless proof of the boy's significance, of the man's significance? Where is mentorship between men? Where are fathers guiding younger men into true maturity? Where are our communities where burdens are shared as opposed to just being silently endured? Within such structure, in fact, where are the women who can at least, okay, I'm not saying pander, I'm not saying strip yourself of, all respect, but I do feel that there is some responsibility for women to also confer respect, not against your values. If you see a man, obviously, who isn't acting in respectable, with respectable conduct, don't fake respect, don't fake pandering just because you want him to see you. But I think that the opposite sex, and this is a reciprocal thing, I feel like we all grow in exposure to a level of confidence expressed in one another. And I don't feel like most men see or are exposed to confidence from other women that is conferred that way. Women don't express belief in them, confidence in them. And I guess that's a complexion of respect. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like we're talking about how toxic this is and how awful this is and how terrible these men are without proposing any real solution or getting into the heart of the problem. And there's also not a lot of sympathy. Do you owe them sympathy? Probably, maybe not. But I don't know. There's a responsibility here. I can't let that go. I just feel like we have a responsibility to our boys, to our men, not because they are men, but because they are human beings,
I just feel like your life shouldn't be a loosely modern rendition of 1984. Your life should not be a perpetual trial. I mean, every subsequent decision becomes an attempt to justify one's existence, and it should not be that way. The possibility that human worth, that human value, that you being worthy of investment from the beginning is not even considered. And yeah, I'll come up. I wish you see, guys, this is what happens when I don't plan my notes out properly. There's no real conclusion, but there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of emotion. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought about the documentary. If you watched it, if you've read 1984, please let me know. What did you think about it? Otherwise, I think that's all I have for you guys today. I will see you hopefully very, very soon. If not, hey, it is what it is. I will try my best. I will try my best. If you want to support me, I do have a Ko-fi, I'm not sure. First it was buy me a coffee, and then I realized that, guys, they don't give out payments to people who live in South Africa, which is wild. So yeah, so you can support me there. Otherwise, you take care and goodbye.